Hi, everyone, and I'd like to welcome you today to the Payments Insight podcast. I'm Charles Radcliffe. I'm the CEO of a company called EthicsGrade. We're a ESG data and research company. And also I'm a recently joined ambassador of the Payments Association, helping look at all aspects ESG. And this is a really big year for us in 2023. We've got a big ESG agenda. And really the purpose of this podcast is to share with members what we're thinking about, what we're doing, best practice, and hopefully we can get everyone started on their ESG journey if you're not already. I'm very happy to be joined by our very special guest, Charlie Bronx, who's the head of ESG for Crown Agents Bank. Charlie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you, Charles, and hello, everyone. I'm the sustainability lead here at Crown Agents Bank, and I'm really pleased to be part of this group. For those that don't know us at Crown Agents Bank, we're a global wholesale bank. We're the oldest startup with a 200-year history, regulated in the UK, and we specialise in cross-border payments and FX for hard-to-reach markets. So we serve over 100 currencies and markets, and through our extensive network and technology and expertise, we work closely with governments, institutions, and organisations that access underserved geographies, and we move money where it's needed, which is our strapline. So a little bit about us. We have a really strong, within our staff component and our stakeholders, we're really passionate about ESG, the social particularly. So that's one of the reasons we're really pleased to be part of this group.
No, it's really great. It's really great. I think maybe let's start in this payments pod episode on ESG, like maybe talk about what actually is ESG, because I know from my own experience, 5 years ago, I didn't even know what those three letters stood for. In fact, I just started a new job heading up AI for Fidelity, a big wealth manager, and everyone was talking about ESG in meetings, and I just had to go and Google it to find out what it was all about. And it struck me that in the last 5 years, it's gone from something that only the investment industry has been thinking about and agonizing over to now something which is front page of the FT every day. In fact, I think 8 out of 10 FT front page articles mention ESG or sustainability in some form. So this is like of the zeitgeist. But what the heck is it about, Charlie?
It's a really good question, and I think one that every time you answer it, whether you put it into ChatGPT or ask a specialist, you're going to get a different answer. I don't think it's CSR on steroids, and I think it's our attempt to address the 1.7 times use of the Earth's resources to what we have. And I think there's got to be some way of measuring. It's the first step. I think it's the first proper step. I know there's been a lot of great work before that, but it's the first step, I think, to be able to measure across all businesses, across that landscape, and bring everyone under the same umbrella of, trying to make an effort. And breaking it into environmental, social, and governance isn't necessarily an exact science. I don't think it's necessarily perfect, but it's sort of step one on the ladder, and we've got a lot of steps to go. So, I think we're all aware that E's environmental, and I like the fact that we've got measures around it. And I think, there's a lot of arguments about whether they're the right measures and how we do it. The social piece is really interesting, and it's something I'm really passionate about. And I know, Charles, you are too, how we measure that, because traditionally it's been something that people don't know how to measure, and saying that you have, just looking internally within your own organization, I don't necessarily think is the answer. I think it should be balanced both externally and internally. And governance, of course, is, for financial organizations, that's very dear to our hearts. Everything we do is about regulation and governance and compliance, especially for us in the markets where we work. So for me, it really is about, taking that step forward. And I think we're going to see future iterations of it. We're seeing it in all the different COPs. We're seeing it in Davos. We're seeing it in all the big meetings. And I think, the next evolution, I think, is probably coming in the next couple of years. But for the time being, this is what we have.
Yeah. I think that's certainly my expectation, is that this will evolve as an area. But I think the 2 points you just made are, this isn't CSR on steroids. That's such an important thing, because I think a lot of people do write off ESG as just a new label for corporate do-gooding. And there's an enormous amount of good work that happens in the CSR community, but it's very, very different. It's grassroots it tends to be passion projects that people in organizations feel like in their local community they can touch. And this stuff is vitally important and should continue, unaffected and unchanged by ESG. But ESG is very much about strategically integrating things into your business so you can measure and report on your performance, and in terms of how your business is affecting environmental targets or social causes, social justice issues, how you've got the right corporate governance in place, ultimately so that your stakeholders, whether that's your investors or your customers or your suppliers, even in terms of the whole network effect, understand the impact that your business is having and how your business might be at risk to the wider ecosystem. And to me, that's why the payments industry is so interesting here. And when we did the work last year, when you and I first spoke a year ago, when we were doing the research for the Sustainability Superheroes report, it really came across in the interviews that we had with all the members that participated, that actually the payments industry has a really unique role to play because of how we touch so many other sectors and other activities that people have. And that seems to be also the very much how you've internalized it at Coronation Bank. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's really fair. And I think there are a few things there. We just unpick a couple of them. One of them was I think how you described that governance piece, and you can, depending on which reporting mechanism you're subject to, and most of us will be doing TCFD, and there's a lot more coming over the horizon, and you might use a rating tool as well. What that does also, it helps people who are passionate about it at all levels within the organization. It's equitable in the way it brings on and holds to account the senior management. And it sometimes, you can feel like you're banging a drum and no one's listening. And I think everyone in this community who is passionate about ESG, sustainability, CSR, has experienced that at some point. And I think what this enables, what ESG, the structure around it, the governance around it, the reporting components around it, it allows it to be formally part of the business. It's part of our reporting mechanism. It's got to be up there, and you can't fudge it. It's non-compliance. You have to do it. You have to be committed. There are no sort of escape routes with this. You're seeing the companies perhaps that are falling foul of that at the moment. Some of them, I think it is not necessarily deliberate, but I think people are falling foul of it because they're learning and perhaps not maybe putting as much resource behind the subject as they should. But I think for the payments industry particularly, that part of your question, I think for smaller companies especially, which a lot of companies who are agile working in the industry are, the lack of resources is really daunting. I mean, smaller companies, we don't have, we're now, growing at a rapid rate, but we were, doing it off the side of the desk to start with. That's not sustainable. You've got limited data as well. Data is always the sort of wonderful sort of ticket, isn't it? If you've got good data, that's a joy, and that gives you possibilities and great, I think, access to do more. And then, of course, maybe a lack of understanding of practices around ESG and what that means. And they'll sometimes pop it into comms or pop it into the side of the desk of HR, and they'll find out quite quickly that's not necessarily the answer. You've got to start, I think, finding groups of people who are already interested, as well as staff who are working in roles where they're able to help and find your sort of steering group. And of course, there's also a limited capacity for long-term planning and financing. So again, as it's quite new, people don't know what they need to invest in it. They think, oh, do I need to double my CSR budget? No, that's absolutely not the way to go. So I think, I think particularly for the payments industry, it's daunting. I think other industries face slightly different challenges, but also the bit that we haven't touched on is where the payments are going, how you report on that in your scope 3 and how that's going to work. And that's the sort of, once you need that in place before you can actually go and start tracking across your procurement and supply chain.
Yeah, but of course there are so many different ways to measure the same thing, and that's, I think, a big bone of contention in this space. I was talking yesterday to head of ESG of FinTech, and they had kind of jump started in a similar way, I think, to you guys, from side of the desk to actually now this being a function. And the frustration that was shared with me was that he said that the problem with ESG is everyone's got an opinion on it, and everyone feels that their opinion is the only opinion that's right. And he gets a lot of people walking into his office or messaging him on Slack saying, "Hey, I think actually we should be looking at this thing in this way." And he said, basically what I'm trying to do here in terms of like the reporting to stakeholders, to investors, to customers, is in many respects a similar type of function that our finance team does. But no one walks into the CFO's office and says, "Hey, I think the way that we account for this, or the way that we amortize this cost should be." No one does that. The finance team get left alone to do their thing. They get respected as being experts. But there was a real frustration here that, because, we all have a passion for environmental causes or social justice causes, because we all know that well-run companies are good business partners, well-run companies outperform the market, certainly over the long term. We all have an opinion on this, and this is a challenge in a way. It's like almost in some respects, it's great that so many people want to come on the journey and be part of it. In other respects, you've got potentially an infinite number of stakeholders to manage. And I'm just curious, with you, you jump-started this from side of desk. Now this is a thing. There's a title, it's a role. You've got resources. How do you manage to bring your stakeholders on the journey so that they're adding to the cause and not just creating more noise for you to manage?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Charles. And I think I approached it in a couple of different ways. So I found out looking at the work I was doing and what was required, looked at the stakeholders I was working with that were already on side and driving. I had support from our CEO, and I also had a really great support from our CRO, who's actually my champion on the board for ESG. That's really important. You've got to find your allies in the business for ESG, and they've got to be. And it's not lip service. This is not a bolt-on. It has to be utterly integrated. That must be the plan. This is not. I know we use the word tick box. It can't be tick box, otherwise you'll fall foul. So I think really understanding that, and actually you get 2 or 3 people who you can bring on board. I had the luxury of working as well with a couple of other experts who were really just helpful in guidance and assuring you weren't going insane when you were doing that sort of trying to bring people on the conversation. But the bit that worked really well, and this won't surprise any of you, is putting a deck together that really talked about the opportunity. So there's a financial opportunity. So for example, we work in hard to reach markets. And I think what I was able to do was to actually sort of spell out in a couple of areas where that opportunity lay, where the threat lay, the threat of non-compliance, what that meant, what that could mean, and also the positive opportunities and the real strength in having great ESG credentials when you're looking at a talent pool that everyone's trying to recruit from. And because if I'm going to a new company and I'm a Gen Z, I would be saying, what are your credentials? Do I like that organization? No. And I've seen that, and we're seeing that. I think there's a lot of data around that will show you that people are making decisions based on the credentials of an organization. So I think there are a number of different things. You put that all together on a deck and it spells out, you're looking at the future direction of an organization. And those credentials are critical, and they touch regulation, they touch profit, they touch fines, they touch the regulators piece, and they touch your talent pool. And when you drill that home and you put it into, the business speak, and it is about ensuring everything. And the wonderful thing about some of the ESG data that's available is you can really make it meaningful to people who are looking at numbers. And I think that's where it really helps. But I think I was very fortunate in having that sort of management support, that management interest, but also we quickly formed a steering group and committed to exploring B Corp certification. So we've been on a journey for 14 months to become a B Corp. And that gave, for anyone who doesn't know how to approach it, go on to B Corp, because you can use a free to use tool to assess where you are, what you need to do to have to be a good corporate citizen. it's a really useful tool and it's free. So I think that was really helpful. And that journey as well, that commitment from the board, from our executive team across the business. And then that really sort of enabled me to create a steering group who I'm very excited about all the work we're going to do this year with them in terms of like impact reports and what have you. So I think you've got to have, you can't go on your own, you've got to engage everyone in the strategy. The people knocking at your door, you're going to get that whether you're in comms, whether you're in ESG, and the fine line between encouraging people to come in with an idea to saying, that's great, do you want to run with that? I suppose there's different ways of approaching it. Like, sometimes I'd like to do it with them, but you've also got to pick and be really selective about what you're going to drive forward, because if you have 100 things, you're not going to achieve them all. If you have 15, 20, you can probably do them really well. So I think being fair to yourself as well, depending on your resource, and it's just you off the side of a desk, maybe it's 5 things, but I don't know if that answered your question, but I think it sort of covers an experience.
Yeah, no, that's a super answer, and I'm glad you touched on the B Corp certification as well, because I still feel that it's a bit of a kind of inside secret in a way of actually what it is all about. I think many people are familiar with the B Corp stamp, but it's still perhaps not kind of hit the mainstream. But what I've noticed that the years I've worked in this space is an increasing number of organizations strive for B Corp certification. And I think it was something that we've at EthicsGate thought about quite long and hard, and we felt it was important to start that journey because ultimately, we're in the business of rating other companies and therefore providing an independent assessment that they are doing what they say they were doing. Someone needs to do that for us as well, and so for us, we felt it was important for somebody to kind of show that we are walking the walk. But we did have, when we were raising investment, we did have investors who said, actually, you've got commercial focus, you need to hit your targets. This is all great, don't get us wrong, but maybe for a little bit later. And we heard that time and time again, so we kind of downplayed that in our plans until we actually met one investor who's now actually on board, who said, we love B Corp, and actually they're B Corp themselves, no surprise. And so, I think the kind of acceptance of what B Corp is about has really really moved, but it's a massive undertaking, particularly for a small organization. We're right at the start. We've just changed our articles. We're just doing our first assessment. But it is a distraction. But you're through that journey.
Not yet.
Can you?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Nearly.
Okay. So nearly through. So you're pending certification. Is that your status at the moment?
No, we're actually verification. So we're going through the sort of Q&A stage. If you look at the B Corp website, then you can find there's some tools there that shows really where you are on the journey and what part of it are. And we're at the moment classified as verification, which is the step before that.
Right.
And they've had, I think, an uplift of, I don't know how many percent. I think it's a huge amount, double at least, of applications going through, because there's 1,000 B Corps in the UK, and I think there's very few banks. And in terms of payments organisations, I think what it really does do, not just with the regulators, but to staff and clients and partners, but it's fantastic to really show that you've gone through a level of due diligence which takes you to a different level. And the articles, for those that don't know, you're changing your articles associations so that they reflect people, purpose, planet, if you like. So they're about all stakeholders. They're not just about making lots of money and profit, which is very important. But part of, I think, the value offer also has to be about people, purpose, planet, because without that, there's no point in having the profit, is there? So I think, I think it's been huge, and the discipline across the business and what we've had to change has not been easy. But what it has done, it helps galvanize that sort of commitment. And our private equity owner, Helios, is a B Corp, and I know that's very important to them. It's also that's helped enormously in terms of our interest in doing it as well, and that commitment. But it is from the bottom up as well as from the top down, which I think works well. Because I think if it's the top down, it's, you know, you're dragging people on the journey, and the same the other way around. But if it's you've got to get people across the business to be involved in it. People have to be committed to it. It's not going to work. This is not about getting an ISO, certification, and it's been invasive, immersive, and challenging.
Yeah, you have to. That comes too strongly with everyone I've spoken to. You have to be truly committed, but not just from the top. You have to be committed all through the ranks as well. Otherwise, you're not going to get there. Yeah, it's something which and I also find now, having started that journey, I take much greater note of the other B Corps that I interact with, and so when I feel good, I'm buying from another B Corp. I feel good when I'm working with another organization on that journey. I think even there are people who are dare I say anti-ESG. I mean, anti-ESG itself gets a fairly strong degree of criticism, but the criticism tends to be, I would say, somewhat politicized. I'm going to sidestep that, but to me, even if you're the most die-hard climate change denier, couldn't give a monkeys about social justice issues, and you think that companies should just be absolutely there to make as much profit in the short term for shareholders as possible. If that is your worldview, then okay. But I mean, the whole point of ESG originally, the where this came out of, was about all evidence is that companies that outperform their competitors if they manage these non-balance sheet risks. And these non-balance sheet risks are, what is the impact to your business of environmental issues? What is the impact of your business on social justice issues? Do you have a corporate governance scandal waiting to blow up? Like, we've seen so many examples of this, Wirecard and FTX in the last 6 months. And so even if you're the most diehard kind of capitalist, to hell with the planet, and we just want to make as much money as possible, ESG is still important. You still need to understand what are the risks in the organizations you're doing business with. And I think if me, B Corp is on the other side of the pendulum swing. It's all about stakeholders and doing good for stakeholders, as well as, and shareholders being one group of stakeholders. And to me, that's very important. But I think even those who don't share that view still need to think about ESG, still need to think about the ESG strategy, because all businesses carry risk and all businesses are affected by social issues and environmental issues. And so I think this is something which isn't optional. It's not political. It's not a choice. This is just a fundamental fact of life that we in business now appreciate, understand, and there is emerging best practice around how we manage it. And you're on that journey. We're all on that journey. And it's important that the Payments Association can help the membership with that journey, because it's a risk to us all if we have things go wrong within the membership. Equally, it's good for us all if the membership can show best practice and demonstrate best practice, and also appreciating that the membership is full of organizations with greater and lesser resources. There's probably a lot that we can do to help those who are startup scale-up end of the spectrum get across the line and move forward. And for me, that's really what this Project ESG is about this year. And yeah, Charlie, what do you think about the Payments Association's role in this and Project ESG?
I think it's really great. I think it's a tool that I think everybody needs to be able to focus on this, because at the moment they've probably got somebody doing the TCFD disclosure. They're asking someone else and trying to work out how to do their GHG calculations and a few other things, and they're trying to get a report from CSR, and that's just not sustainable for this solution. So I think the Payments Association, I think this approach and actually the provision of working together, and we collectively try to come up with some useful guides and documents and pitfalls to avoid. I think that's been really, really important. There's a lot of things I'd love to have known before I set out, but things like knowing, for example, what we've just discussed around the B Corp tool, the fact that really helped us create, define, design, engage. It was such a useful system, and you don't have to pay the fees to join. You can just pay a token amount to be on the tracks. You don't have to get engaged the whole way through. But you know, knowing where the pitfalls are, having a buddy system where you can ask somebody, you know, ask an expert, you know, be able to ask you, Charles, what you think about this or that, and or ask me about that B Corp process, and what do you do around this, which track should you be on, which makes more sense when you see their Q&A piece. You know, can you recommend someone to work with on it? It may be that you've just got resource and you've got a budget. What sort of budget's reasonable? It could be really basic questions, but these are baby steps and you can't go forward unless you've done them. And other people will have done, you know, a more comprehensive one. And so I think there's sort of sharing depending on the size of the organization. But ultimately, it's got to be about, we want the payments industry to flourish as a whole. We want to be able to collaborate and work together with companies that have a similar value system to us. And we want the UK payments industry to be seen as something that is robust and, you know, really good on ESG, great in terms of, you know, a trusted partner. You know, it's a win-win for everyone, really. And, you know, it's a great way for us to get really excited and not too militant about ESG.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think also the point, just to re-emphasize, not reinvent the wheel here. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. I mean, of course, there's many different ways to get to the destination. There's plenty of scope for innovation. You know, all of us, you know, working in this space are trying to, you know, find the best path there. But, you know, you're not, if you're looking at this and have the request from stakeholders to start to report or start to put in place a strategy, you know, you're certainly not the first person to have done that. And there's a huge amount of support and I think willingness. You know, to me, it just doesn't feel like work. You know, there's a huge amount of satisfaction and reward, sort of, you know, intangible reward for helping people in this space. And I find one of the really nice things about this, compared to, you know, anything else I've done in my career, which has mostly been, you know, helping rich people get richer, working in banks and the like. This is, you know, this is something where, you know, there is an impact at the end of the day. And, you know, and that means that when you get an email from somebody who just wants to ask a question, you know, I'm very happy to spend that time on that. And I think that's been my experience of the whole of this community. And so, so I guess there's elements of this project which is about just awareness and marketing to the membership that, you know, we're here, there are resources we can support, but also best practice, but also I think channeling focus. Yeah, there's a million things we could do. There's a million things we could focus on. We need to make sure we're focusing on the ones that we have the greatest chance of being able to move the needle on, and also the ones which are the most important, most impactful, most material to the membership, to the industry. And yeah, there's best practice for that. I mean, you shared with me resources that you've come across and put together on this. You know, I think there's a lot of strength in that. And what do you encourage other members to do if they want to be involved? Charlie, what are the kind of first practical
yeah,
steps?
I mean, there's a lovely chap called Tom Bruin at the Payments Association, and I would move heaven and earth, get in touch with him, and, you know, become part of the group, because I think one of as you've just described so eloquently, being part of this group is a great thing. It's a network. You get like-minded people. Sometimes you need to be amongst like-minded people when you're doing ESG. Sometimes it can be, you know, to avoid that headache. And I think also, don't be afraid to ask for help. You know, if you put something on LinkedIn that you're looking for, or, you know, whichever group you're part of, you'll find that there's a huge amount of resource and a community out there that want to help. It's I saw a really lovely thing today on LinkedIn with people looking for social impact jobs, and someone put on it saying, "Oh, look, I'm setting up this group on LinkedIn," and they have been inundated with people trying to join. It can be anything from, you know, the social impact piece to the whole ESG. I think getting engaged and with this group is a really good start, but just not being afraid to take those little steps and just start reading. I've just done a course with the Cambridge Business Sustainability Management course, which I really highly recommend. That was amazing. I've got some really good tools that I've experienced with EcoVadis, one of the rating agencies. That was great. B Corp, all of them provide that sort of solution, but make sure the one you use is the right one for your business. There are some tools out there to assess which one is right for you. But it is about, you know, just start talking to people. And no one knows all the answers. Don't be afraid with that either. And anyone who says they know everything on this, they don't.
You definitely don't. Yeah.
It's just morally the right thing to do, and it's great to be part of something that is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. So so hopefully we've inspired you listening, and hopefully you want to get involved. And even if not, that's fine. But hopefully you understand now why we're doing this and how important it is. But yeah, hopefully you're now listening, thinking, yes, I want to take that next step. I want to figure out how to connect my organization to this great work. And the answer is Tom Bruin. I'm sure we can find a way of putting the email address up on the screen or something when this goes to post-production. But yeah, if you contact Payments Association, and would love to get you involved. And I think joining the first kickoff meeting just a week or two ago, I can't remember exactly when it went out, but you know, as the meeting started and you saw the Zoom call start to expand with all the little boxes, and then it kept going and kept going. I think the first comment that Tony Credit made was, "My word, there's a lot of people on this." That's unusual, and I think that's really a testament to how important this is for the membership. So yeah, we've got a lot of people involved, but there's always space for more. So please do get in touch. So look, Charlie, thank you for your insights today, and also thank you to everyone listening to the Payments Pod episode on ESG. Yeah, if there's more that you'd like to learn, please get in touch. You can reach Charlie or myself. Find us on LinkedIn. Tom, obviously at the Payments Association, and please spread the word. I think more importantly, if you found this as interesting podcast, please do share it. So thank you everyone, and hope you join us again for a future episode of the Insight podcast series. Thank you.
Join us for our next episode of the Payments Pod.